Hey, good afternoon. We'll just jump in real quick. We had some quick introductions, but just to kind of round that out a little bit more. My name's Anthony Berg. I'm based out of Atlanta. I'm a principal with Deloitte's Cyber Risk Services practice. Been focused on identity for about 20 years. I lead Deloitte's SailPoint Alliance, and I also lead our digital identity offering. So that's me in a nutshell. And
good afternoon, everyone. Badri Namani. I'm a senior manager in our GPS, our government public services side of the practice. Have been in the identity space for almost 14 years and lead our digital identity for our government and public service clients. So excited to be here.
All right, so we'll jump in. So I'm going to confess, from the commercial side of things. Badri really covers the government public sector side of things. So I apologize if my take on things tends to have a commercial leaning. I also want to set the stage real quick. When we say digital identity in some contexts really means consumer identity. It's become kind of another name for consumer identity. That is not the case at all. When Deloitte talks about digital identity, we're talking about identity as it relates to digital transformation in its full context, enterprise and consumer type scenarios. So digital identity, kind of the thought that gave rise to digital identity is this: as we talk to our clients about what they want, what we heard is cloud first. That was a theme. We heard about frictionless user experience. Clients have employees, citizens, whatever, that are using these different commercial applications, and they're used to face recognition and thumbprints and just an easy kind of seamless experience. And then they show up at the office and they think, okay, what's going on? Why is there such a big disconnect? So they're wanting this frictionless user experience. And then agility. And so what we found, what clients often have is those things on the right-hand side here. Costly, complex environments. We've seen, when you talk about slow rates of digital transformation, I've worked with clients even as recently as last month where I showed up on site, kind of listened to what's going on, and they're 18 months, almost 2 years into an upgrade process, and realize that as soon as they call that project a success, it's going to be time to upgrade again, and they haven't actually gotten much net additional value. They're just trying to maintain these like legacy systems. So the question that we asked ourselves is, what if there was a turnkey identity solution? And we focused on, there's a couple key words in this sentence here on measurable business outcomes, the time to value, and the cloud. Those are really kind of the three drivers that led us to create what we were calling digital identity. Digital identity, just to kind of unpack what exactly it is, it's a managed service offering where we've taken best-of-breed products. So they're not on the slide. You can kind of see that space under the platform technologies. That's where it used to say SailPoint, CyberArk, and Okta before somebody risk reviewed them out. But those are the platform solutions. We also use ForgeRock for consumer identity. We use Okta for MFA and SSO. We use CyberArk for privilege. And we use SailPoint for identity and access management, provisioning, access governance, and so on. So we've knit all this together, and then we've wrapped around it a collection of pre-built use cases, robotics process automation. We've streamlined the CI/CD processes, automated test-driven development, and so on, and kind of wrapped that all together to create what we're calling digital identity. But from a federal perspective.
So again, this is a solution that came in, or that was primarily developed on the commercial side of our practice, but saw a lot of need within our government clients. So as much as there was need, there are some specific requirements that needed to be addressed before that solution was relevant for the clients here. Things like FedRAMP. So where this infrastructure is being hosted, does that align with some of the FedRAMP requirements? Requirements around strong authentication, being able to leverage PIV, CAC, and derived credentials. So those were big requirements that needed to be part of the solution, which they are. So in addition to some of the commercial leading software components, there's also portions of the solution that are very much aligned to meet some of the government-specific requirements. So one example I'll provide is a component called Authentication Bridge as a Service. So for a lot of folks here, you are very familiar with the PKI components and the complexity involved in terms of trusting a credential that's issued by DoD within Department of State or a credential that's issued by Department of Agriculture across in a different agency. So the authentication bridge as a service, which is a custom component into the overall solution, really enables those strong authentication requirements, being able to leverage those credentials that are issued by pretty much any agency or any entity that falls under the FPKI bridge. So components like that are really what differentiate the solution from some of the best of breed technologies out there.
So when we talk about the value, I'm not going to go through these just with the limited time that we have today. I won't go through these in detail. And we will cover some of these in the remainder of our conversation. But what I want to talk about is this, like at the bottom, the predictable service level agreements and costs. When I first started selling this, my background is delivering on-prem solutions, doing strategies, and then implementing, and then leaving. And as we went to market with this, and as I was going through my first few sales cycles, I didn't notice the difference in the conversation until I was meeting with a particular team, and the CISO is listening as her team's asking all these questions about how we do it, architecture type questions and deep questions, kind of in the weed questions. And finally she says, why are you guys asking these questions? They're going to provide all this as a service. The questions we need to ask are, what do we get? What are the service level agreements, right? Like, not how are you doing it, but what are you committing to as you deliver it to us? And so one of the big changes here is, of course, you want to understand, is it running on FedRAMP, and does it meet certain requirements in the commercial space? Everybody wants the SOC 2 report and so on. So there's definitely questions that you should ask, but it's really a paradigm shift where instead of having to worry about the details of how it's done, you can really worry about the business outcome. So it's a shift in conversation about business outcomes and time to value, not about the specifics about architecture and backups and security and so on. Those things are built into the solution. So just to kind of talk about where it fits, so all that this chart is meant to show is, on the left-hand side, you have the users that are accessing the system. On the right-hand side, you have the managed resources. And then you have in the middle what the digital identity offering is, and it's reporting up to the client IAM owner and ultimately to the steering committee. So it's really the services related to whatever you decide to put in that bucket, right? So for some companies, they only want us to provide access governance, right? And for some companies, it's only privilege. For some, it's the entire stack. Whatever those things are, that's the identity services. So we provide the maintenance and operations and the delivery of that service. So that includes things like patches and upgrades. That becomes the responsibility of us, or if you were to go with someone else, with the managed service provider, right? So that entire box of things that tends to be the fires that you're putting out every day and the things that are distracting you so often from what's next, how do we move our identity program forward? We just take everything in that box and just own that problem. And that doesn't just include the operations of what you initially implement. That includes the ongoing operations of things like onboarding new applications, making adjustments to workflows, enhancements and whatnot. That's built into the managed service paradigm.
And a couple of other things to kind of note from a representation as such. It's not to represent that it's really a packaged solution of all of those technologies, all of those components together. It really, the best way to kind of see that is it's really an a la carte model of either services, capabilities, as to what makes best sense. So that kind of perspective could be applied, be it on the technology layer, on the governance layer, aspects around hosting, aspects around who manages, for example, certain areas of responsibility in here. But again, the ideal best case scenario is to say, from a digital identity point of view, all of this is packaged, really offered to you in a different paradigm than traditionally people have been used to, more as SLAs driven, more at specific measurable metrics than to the points that Anthony touched upon, be it backups, patching, upgrades. So all the challenges that you deal with running a solution on a day-to-day basis, all of that is really taken away, and it's really a service as a solution that's available for you.
So this slide here really addresses and I know some of the stats seem unbelievable, but we've done a bunch of these now, and we know that it just is that much faster because the infrastructure is deployed from a golden image. We're using SailPoint. You'll hear later this afternoon their accelerator pack. We're taking advantage of that. We've built in all the automation into how the build processes and the delivery is done. We're able to deliver the initial implementation faster and also realize significant efficiencies on the ongoing operations. But one of the things that isn't in our deck, but that I've seen as a theme as I've gone around and met with clients and moved them onto this platform, one of their drivers is not actually about elasticity or automation or time to value, it's talent. There's a significant shortage of talent, especially depending on the geography you're in or the particular industry you're in. And we found that because we're bringing a global team to bear, and Deloitte pulls resources from where there is talent and can bring it to bear in geographies and in industries that otherwise struggle to find that talent. It's another advantage of the system is just having the expertise that you need in privilege or in whatever it is. And I know there's...
Yeah, and as much as on the commercial side, yes, you have that flexibility of kind of pulling the resources from across the globe to deliver that seamless 24/7 operation. There were specific considerations as the solution was being tailored for the government industries. So in terms of how do we deliver, how do we offer the service at the same SLAs, meeting some of the same core aspects that we deliver to our commercial clients, to our federal and state and local clients as well. So things like delivering the solution out of delivery centers, so geographically distributed across time zones delivery center, where the solution is hosted in terms of being able to provide the solution at that high levels of SLAs, with high redundancy built into the overall solution. So those are all the perspectives that went into it. And to the points that Anthony mentioned, I'm pretty sure, like, especially around talent, it's even that much more challenging, as we all have seen, especially finding the people with the right skill set, the right technologies, the right background, and now tying that to the background investigations, the security clearances, and the requirements around that exist in this market. So that's really the focus of like what we have been able to accomplish in terms of establishing delivery centers across 3 different regions within the country and enabling the services to meet pretty much the same SLAs, or enabling the services in a way that we have talked about thus far, really SLA driven from a complete shift in paradigm. One other thing I would touch upon, somewhat specific to the 90%, the increase in deployment speed by 90%. I'm pretty sure like a lot of us here have dealt with the timelines that it takes to procure hardware, to put it in a traditional data center, to get it hardened, to get a different team to install the OS, manage the OS, harden the OS, and then layers of timeline on all of that to make a solution, to get a solution to at least a point where it's ready and it's ready to go out of the door. So digital identity from a federal point of view, it's really a solution that meets all of those requirements pretty much out of the gate, in terms of patching, in terms of hardening underlying operating system. It's all ready to go. And on top of it, it also has some of the industry-specific use cases built in. For example, for the audience in here, some of the core use cases around CDM, from an asset or from a MER mapping, from a priv management, from a cred management point of view. Those are some of the use cases that are pre-built into the initial baseline of the solution.
Awesome. So before I jump to we just have one more slide. Badri's going to go through and just talk a little bit more in detail about how this relates specifically to government-type clients. This is not just slideware. I know there's a lot of talk about managed services and kind of a move in that direction. This is actually something, Deloitte's been doing this for 5 to 10 years in some cases, especially with some of our larger government clients. But in the last couple of years, this is something that's real and tangible that's taken off. And we've delivered this many times now with SailPoint, but also with the other vendors that were mentioned. But just to kind of talk about some of the successes that we've had in the federal space.
So a case study from a large federal client gives you an idea of the scale in terms of the total number of users or identities that we currently support in an ecosystem that we have touched upon. The number of credentials that we manage, close to 150,000 credentials. And again, some of the things that we touched upon, the primary driver for a solution like this is not anymore servers, patching, hardening, all of that. Yes, all of those are very critical, very important, but it's not anymore the primary focus of the agencies to kind of worry about that. It's really a service that's available that meets all of those like baseline requirements. The critical conversation is really, are you getting a service that's at that level of SLA with 99.99% of uptime for the critical services? For folks who are interested in terms of how it's all done across multiple data centers with redundancy, with high availability built in to the architecture. So it's just not a solution that's out there to kind of meet some of the requirements. I think that's a big takeaway that I want folks to kind of take it from here. It's a solution that's continuously being evolved, continuously meets some of the evolving technology as well as compliance requirements. So some of the aspects that we have been able to demonstrate in this specific scenario is aspects like credentialing a bot. So very recent, very relevant to some of the challenges that a lot of us kind of face. But really what we were able to kind of do working in collaboration with the agency was leveraging the ecosystem that we provide. What's the means to credential a bot, both from a technology, from a policy, as well as the governance point of view. So aspects like that, or authentication into cloud, that's another big aspect in terms of as those investments have been made to deploy a technology that provides identity authentication services for the traditional applications, how do you leverage the same as steps are being taken to kind of evolve into the cloud with applications like ServiceNow, Salesforce, all applications that can be integrated pretty much as out-of-the-box capabilities in some of the solutions that we have here. And some of the things that I touched upon, for example, Authentication Bridge as a service, that's a huge, huge differentiator in the solution. Just being able to create that frictionless experience for users coming in from a particular agency with a particular credential, have a legitimate need to interface and work closely with other agencies. How do you trust that credential? How do you make it seamless in terms of there's an existing process that they have gone through to get that credential? How do you leverage all of that and give them the access that they need into the ecosystem in the other agencies? So really what we wanted to highlight in here is it's really not a core service. It's really from some of the components that we have talked about, it's really the paradigm shift, and on top of it, it's a continuously evolving solution that meets or that's continuously meeting some of the innovation and leading edge requirements that are coming out from the marketplace.
Awesome. And before we open up for Q&A, I just have a question for you guys. How many of you have some component of your identity services from your organization in the cloud today? A couple small hands, not a lot of confidence there, but who has plans to move some component of your identity to the cloud? I just see maybe two more. Interesting. So I'd be interested to hear some thoughts about that. So questions. Anything's fair game. So we're here to answer any questions that you have. I don't know if is there a mic runner? Yes, perfect. You have a question up here.
There's a lot of things here, lots of things. When you say service level agreement, it means lots of things in a lot of context, a lot of use cases. Give me some of the use cases where you think that you as an offerer is going to offer this SLA, and I will have a pretty good understanding of what am I getting. Is there any way I can audit you, and what penalties can we impose on you? other than saying, I'm going to do better next quarter or next year?
Absolutely. So specific to this group in here, that's ideally defined in the contracts that you've defined, right? And I'll expand like in terms of the SLAs themselves. So in this specific scenario, some of the critical services, or let me even step back. The system that we have in here is a FISMA high system. It's critical. It needs to be up and available at all points of time because it protects access to some critical infrastructure that's critical to the agency. So the core requirement in this case is the authentication services, for example, needed to be at that % of SLA uptime. It's not planned SLAs or planned downtimes, planned maintenance, or any of that. It really needs, the service needs to be up and running at any given point of time for that % of SLAs for authentication services. But there are other components, for example, identity management, onboarding users, say aspects around access certification. You don't need that level of SLAs. So again, it's just not something that we would say, or even when you're looking at it from the other perspective of that's a common criteria, set a number, and that's across the board for all services. It really, the perspective should be, what are those truly those critical services? What is critical for my business needs? And for example, the way I mentioned in here, authentication services in this specific case was defined to be that critical service versus some of the other services around workflow, identity management, and things like that could wait, for example, an hour or two, even if for whatever reason things didn't work out. So that's the point, that's the way I would see it, and it's all contract, it's something that could be contractually enabled to make all of that happen on the in the ways that you mentioned there.
Yeah, and we bring to the table kind of a default, here's a starting point for SLA negotiation. But it's more, in the ones that I've done so far, it hasn't been, hey, do better. It's, if we don't achieve certain levels, there's financial rewards back to the client and other type of compensatory arrangements that are put in place. And to date, no one's just said, hey, those are perfect for us. They've all been tailored to the specifics of that client and of the specific technologies.
And there are means, very formal means to monitor that, to report that on a periodic basis. So there's a lot of perspectives that you need to think through in terms of how do you monitor services. It cannot be within the same ecosystem. You need to monitor it from as an end user would monitor for the services to be up and running. So, and how do you keep all that conversation transparent with your clients? So there's a lot of perspectives that we can kind of go deeper into.
Awesome. Any other questions? No questions? All right, we'll be thinking about that move. That move to the cloud. All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.